The Rambler Network.
Let's talk about Obsession. By the way, this is obviously going to have spoilers for Obsession. Now, this isn't a review, but after I watched it in theaters, and especially after I watched it a second time on Peacock, I realized I had some opinions about the movie. More specifically, about Bear. I genuinely think Bear is one of the most disturbing movie villains I've seen in a long time. He's not physically intimidating or particularly intelligent. He's disturbing because there are people who watch this movie and don't think he's the villain. That's the scary part. When I first watched the movie, I heard people saying Nikki was just as bad. She led him on. She knew how he felt. She should have been clearer. Then I watched it again and paid close attention to the beginning, and I don't see it. Not even a little. If anything, Nikki spends the opening of the movie treating Bear the way someone treats a sibling or a lifelong friend. She's comfortable around him and even trusts him enough to say, "You're the only one I can talk to about these things." She even tries to get him interested in Sarah. That isn't someone stringing a guy along. That's someone who has absolutely no idea the person she's talking to has built an entire fantasy around her. There's a difference between kindness and flirting, friendship and romance, and there's definitely a difference between someone's intentions and another person's assumptions. Bear isn't responding to Nikki as she actually is. He's responding to the version of Nikki he's created in his own mind. And that's an important distinction because once you've replaced a real person with an imaginary version of them, you stop listening to who they actually are, and that's what happens. As the movie goes on, Bear becomes increasingly convinced that Nikki belongs with him. Notice the language. He doesn't say she'd be happier with him or hopes she'll choose him. He says she belongs with him. That shift is subtle, but it's enormous. Love asks, "What do you want?" Possession says, "Why won't you give me what I want?" Those are completely different questions. Eventually, Nikki loses control of herself. She's no longer acting according to her own will. Someone else is making those decisions for her. Now, I've had conversations with people who disagreed with me about what comes next, because Bear knowingly sleeps with Nikki while fully aware that the person he's interacting with isn't really Nikki anymore. To me, that's horrifying. If someone doesn't have the ability to freely choose, then consent becomes impossible. Whether that's because they're unconscious, intoxicated, or, in this case, literally under supernatural control, the ethical problem is the same. The body is present, but the person isn't free. That sounds like rape to me. Now, I know people will debate the exact terminology. Some people reserve certain words for specific legal definitions. That's a conversation worth having. But whatever label you use, the moral issue doesn't disappear. Bear knows Nikki isn't herself, and instead of trying to save her, he takes advantage of the situation. That tells me everything I need to know about his character. There's a moment that completely sealed it for me. The real Nikki is pleading for someone to end what's happening. She would rather die than remain trapped. Bear hears this, and instead of saying, "How do I help you?" or showing even the smallest amount of concern, he says, "What's so wrong with being with me?" Think about that. That's one of the most revealing lines in the entire movie. He's not asking what Nikki wants. He's asking why Nikki won't validate what he wants. She's begging for her freedom. He's wondering why she doesn't appreciate the opportunity to be with him. That's not love. That's entitlement. There's another story that came to mind while I was thinking about this. A couple days ago, I watched Spider-Man Brand New Day. This next part is a spoiler for that if you haven't seen it. There's a scene where Jean Grey possesses MJ and kisses Peter Parker. Peter kisses her back because, as far as he knows, it is MJ. When he learns it isn't really her making that choice, he's horrified. When he finally sees the real MJ, he apologizes. She tells him it's okay because she doesn't even remember it happening. But Peter still feels guilty. Why? Because he knows the truth. He recognizes the real MJ never actually chose that moment. His instinct is remorse. Bear's instinct is the opposite. Once he realizes Nikki isn't really choosing him, he embraces the situation. Now he doesn't have to worry about what she actually wants. That's the difference. One character values the other person's agency, the other values getting what he wants. I've noticed something interesting whenever stories like this come up. People often rush to find something the victim did wrong. Maybe she smiled too much, or was too friendly, or shouldn't have spent time with him, or maybe she led him on. Obsessive people don't always respond to reality. They respond to the story they've written in their own heads. And once someone starts believing that another human being belongs to them, normal acts of kindness become declarations of love. Rejection becomes betrayal. Boundaries become obstacle. And consent becomes optional. That's why Bear is the villain. When forced to choose between Nicky's freedom and his own happiness, he chooses himself every single time. The real horror is watching someone mistake possession for love and realizing there are people who watch the exact same movie and can't see the difference.
The Rambler Network.